Good morning. I am Marty Smith. It's good that I can remember my name, huh? I'm glad you all made it. Did you go to breakfast? Was it good? Good, good. We're here today talking about working with families who are touched by incarceration. It's definitely a growing number. The latest statistics I have heard is that 1 out of every 10 children in the US have a parent who's either incarcerated or connected with probation and parole. So I'm sure everybody in this room is working with a family, whether you know it or not. It's not something that a lot of families like to brag about. You know, certainly carries a stigma with it. Anyway, I've been doing this basically for 2 decades now, because prior to being in Missoula, I was in Billings and worked in the domestic violence program. And most of those families were touched by incarceration in some way. So I certainly don't consider myself an expert. I want this to be an information sharing session. I will learn from you, I hope, and you will learn from me. That's our goal. You can see behind my name, I have LE. Anybody know what that stands for? It's very important. Life experience. And I have 63 years of it. CS? Okay, you got a clue here. What's the CS stand for? Common sense, right? And probably the least important of those credentials is my Bachelor of Science degree. Because without the first 2, that information wouldn't have made much sense to me at all. So that's who I am. I've been a parent for 43 years. I'm still a parent. I'll be a parent till I take my last breath. I always get just a kick out of people saying, oh, I can't wait till she leaves. Can't wait till she's 18 and out of the house. I think, oh man, that's when your problems just start beginning, right? Who has a kid over 18? You know what I'm talking about, right? They get to be adults, they think they know what they're doing. I work as the program manager. I never know what my job is at the Parenting Place. Parenting Place has been around in Missoula for about 30 years. And basically our mission is to prevent child abuse and neglect. We don't market ourselves that way because that sounds icky. So we say strengthening families. And that really is what we're doing. I'm also the state coordinator for MAFTI, and that is Montana Alliance for Families Touched by Incarceration. It's a collaborative effort, people from all over the state, and it started about 2 years ago. Our current project is working on a toolkit for service providers, caregivers, anyone who needs it. It's a 48-page document on how to talk to children about the criminal justice system. And we try to walk them through each segment of that, from arrest to arraignment to blah, 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 right on down. So there's a little section in there for each of those, because it's difficult to know. And you know, there's a lot of controversy. How do you talk to kids, you know? How much do you tell them? What do you tell them? So that's great. Anything else about MAFTI? Okay. The other thing I do is I provide service through our state. You got some handouts there. Everybody got one. And on here you see we talk about the State Family Resource Center. That is sponsored primarily by Montana Children's Trust Fund. We have an email address You can write for information. We also have an 800 telephone number that people can call, ask questions, get referrals, information, support, sometimes just a chance to vent to someone. So that's it for that. I'm sorry, this is Teresa Nygaard. She is our executive director at the Parenting Place. She also is the best support system you could ever ask for. She's gonna help me write today because I don't write very well when I talk. Not good at the multitasking thing. So I think next, it's gonna be your job to talk because I need a break. Now we're going to get to know who you are. I really do want you to get information from here that you came here to get. So I'm going to let you lead where this goes. Who wants to tell me who you are? Nobody. Let's just go around and introduce ourselves real quick, because I think that's fun. Nobody ever. Would you like to start? Oh. Oh, yeah? Well, you can just cut out all that other part, too. Thank you all for sharing, and especially thank you for telling me why you came. Do we have some other volunteers to tell why? What kind of information do you want? Information is pretty general word. Oh, I'm sorry, camera guy, I forgot to cue you. Whoops. Yeah.
I want to know how much is too much when you're talking to kids.
Okay.
And also how to talk to kids and families who are anticipating incarceration. Building up to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just ideas for mentoring the high school students dealing with the parents incarceration.
For mentoring the high school students whose parents are incarcerated. Okay.
That second one I missed, I'm sorry.
How to talk to families, and especially children, when they're anticipating incarceration. Jail time is
Murder woman. My brain only goes one
Does like the incarceration necessarily have to be like going to like jail time, or could that be like incarcerated like in a treatment facility program also?
Absolutely. To me, incarceration means anything from probation, parole, to prison. Anything in between. Anything connected with Department of Corrections, where there are rules to follow, there's a stigma that comes with it. That's what it means.
I just like want to like know like how to sit down with little kids and see how like parent is going off, you know.
Right. It's difficult. Do a lot of you find yourself in a situation where you have to talk to the kids about this? There's not a caregiver who is talking, but a lot of times the caregivers don't know how to talk to their kids about it either, you know? That's definitely a big challenge. And I'm going to tell you what I tell the people who take my parenting classes at the pre-release. I don't have all the answers. I'm not even sure there are right and wrong answers. You know, we're pretty early in this. It also it's a social dynamic. So every situation is different. Every child is different. One 5-year-old is not like another 5-year-old. So the amount of information and how it's presented to that child has to be unique to the child. So what I'm going to do, what I'm hoping will come out of this today, is that you'll get a few more tools for your toolbox, but you're the one who has to open that toolbox and decide which one to use, okay? You know, it would be great if we had a manual that said, okay, arrest. How do we talk to them about their experience with arrest? But it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Okay, anybody else want to share anything? Yes.
I guess my question that I would like to have answered today is, reoccurring arrests with a certain parent, and talking to that parent and having her take ownership of what's happening. She talks openly about it, and it's not a big deal to her, I guess.
Yes.
I just don't understand that.
All right. That's the other thing I want to tell you. If a thought comes into your mind anytime, throw your hand up. You can interrupt me as long as you promise to get me back on task. Because sometimes, I just start going off, and then I think, okay, now what was I talking about? So, I don't expect you to hold everything until at the end for a question and answer time. It is information sharing. So if you have a thought, let's talk about it as it comes into your brain. I'm going to tell you.
We have one more question, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
From a school standpoint, how to deal with truancy, bullying, and teasing with involving the student in a better manner?
Yeah. These are some challenging issues that you've brought up. And it'll be good to discuss them. First off, our program is strengths-based, right? When I walk into a room of 20 incarcerated males, I don't care what their crime was. It's not important to me. What I try to identify, first off, is where are their strengths and how can we build on those, right? Because I always say, you know what? I don't care what your crime was. I'm not going to be pointing out your weaknesses, because if I point out yours, you'll start pointing out mine, and that doesn't feel good to me. That really damages my ego. So always strengths-based. Healthy families are made of healthy individuals. You can't just work with mom. You can't just work with dad. You can't just work with the kid. You have to work with the entire package. And sometimes that includes grandma, grandpa, cousins, uncles. A lot of people are influential in the dynamics of these families. That's what makes this such a difficult and time-consuming job. We use the family systems approach, which means all members are equally important and responsible for changing patterns of interaction. And anytime a family is affected by incarceration, there is change. There is transition, there's change, everybody has an adjustment time, and it's a very long, drawn-out process. One of the toughest times for me is when a parent has completed their institutional incarceration and is now going out into the community on probation or parole, going back to reunite with the family. We all know that kids, that brain development just keeps moving, just keeps moving along. So if mom or dad's been away for 2 years, their 2-year-old they're not even going to know the 4-year-old, right? Because that child is going to be totally different because of development, because of life experiences, and so forth. So is the parent. When people are incarcerated, they usually choose one of two routes. Either they will go in there and sort of vegetate, or they learn everything they can learn and think about their behavior and how are they going to change it. So when they come back home, they're a different person. It sounds great if mom went to prison for meth, but when mom comes back into that environment where she was using meth and she isn't using anymore, it's different. It's better, of course we know it's better, but it's different. It's a change for the child. The child's used to mom being under the influence of meth. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Children tend to behave consistent with the way they're treated. And you know what? So do our families. If we treat them like they're criminals, they'll behave like they're criminals. If we treat them like they're less than we are, that's how they'll behave. So, our program is extensive. You can see this quickly. First, we get a referral. Referrals come from Department of Corrections, sometimes DFS, the pre-release center, the detention facility. With the new MAFTI phone, they come from Glendive, Ekalaka, they can come from anywhere because we have so many people who are affected by incarceration. The rest of this mostly applies to what we're doing here in Missoula. We have an intake. It's called a getting to know you session. It's sitting down with the incarcerated parent and talking about who they are, what are their goals, where would they like to be a year from now, and just really getting to know where are your kids, how old are they, how often have you had contact with them, what do you expect to happen once you go back home. Then they sit through 10 weeks of parenting classes, and we call them parenting classes, but they're really more life skills. To be a parent, you have to have your life in order. So we talk a lot about other things, healthy relationships, good nutrition, just tons and tons of other things that also affect this family and how they function. We can assist them with parenting plan. Many of our incarcerated parents have had a change in what's going on. So it's important that they have a parenting plan in place. If they want to continue to be a part of their children's lives, they need to protect that in court. And I always say it doesn't make any difference. Yeah, you've got a great relationship with mom or with dad right now, but what if mom or dad, ex-mom or dad, whatever, has a new partner and the new partner doesn't like you? Then what happens to that relationship? So just protect yourself. It's not a threat to anybody. It's a simple little document. You can pull, go.
So as far as the parenting plan assistance goes, what does that look like exactly? Because we do a lot of parenting plan discussion at Futures, and we can print out the 40-page document off of the content services
Yes.
website, but other than that, we don't really know what to do. I mean, we refer them to Montana Legal Services if they don't qualify. That's kind of a big gap in our services. So how do you?
For the most part, those forms are overwhelming. Is everyone familiar with the packet? I mean, it's so thick. And so much of it is redundant. You have to file 2 or 3 different forms, and it's the same information in each form. It doesn't make sense to me. First, let me say we do not give legal advice. The bar has contacted us about that. We do not advise them legally, but just all of that paper is overwhelming to our families, And when they're overwhelmed with so many things, if we can be there to help, and we just say, I know it looks icky, but it's not going to be. It's fairly simple, so let's walk through it. Just talk to them about it, A lot of times they want to know what's fair in visitation, and, it's hard to say what's fair. I can tell you what usually happens, and that's the even year, odd year, mom, dad, etc. Does that make any sense to you? And then we tell them, okay, now this document needs to go to the courthouse, and most of our clients get the fee waiver. You can have the fee waived for that. I think, because Missoula, I think maybe it's $125 to file now. I'm not sure. That could have changed. And most of our clients, if you're incarcerated, you probably don't have that kind of money. So then they take it to the courthouse, just sort of walk them through the steps, but they have to do it, We will sit there and empower, but not enable. And that's tough, I mean, it's tough for me, and I find myself sneaking over into that enabling area, and then I have to jump back and say, no, let it go. Okay? Is that good? Good. We also do mediation with a custodial caregiver. A lot of moms are prohibited from seeing their children by the bio father because she's been in and out 2-3 times. He's gonna disrupt the lives of the kids once more. And I have a difficult time with that, I have to tell you. Do we want to do it again? Yeah, she sounds good. And, and I think one thing that I always just get a chuckle out of is when they say to me, well, I've been clean for 2 years. And I think, Montana Women's Prison, how many drugs are available there? Of course she's been clean for 2 years, you know. She hasn't had access to it. But she also hasn't been back in her playground with her playmates, right? Back where every day she is faced with making that choice. Do I use, do I not use? She or he. We'll just interchange those. In my particular job, about 80% of the clients I work with are male, simply because that's kind of the way our pre-release is set up. 80% male, 20% female. So our clientele is primarily, well, at least the primary clientele starts out to be male. That mediation can be really important. Just making a phone call sometimes. You know, just saying to mom, you know, I understand your concern. How about if we do a visit here at the parenting place? If you don't want to see him, you can drop the kids off to me. And you're welcome to come spend the afternoon, let the kids get comfortable here. You get comfortable, you make the rules, I'll make sure they get enforced. You know, one thing we always do during visitation is you're not talking to these kids about the future. They don't need to hear any promises about the future. You talk about what's going on here and now. What's going on with your kids, not what you're going to do for them once you get out. That's one more possible disappointment that they just don't need in their lives. Resource referral, we all do that, don't we? And weekly we try to do a one-on-one session to offer support, help them process, and also advocate for them. Many times we will work as an advocate. Last month I worked as an advocate out of New Mexico because we have a gentleman, or had, at the pre-release, who was tied up with the court system in New Mexico. So, you know, we can make the phone calls and we can just advocate for these parents, saying they are on the right track. They are currently taking the right steps. You know, let's give them a chance. We offer respite care. We have 3 nights a week at the parenting place where parents can call, make a reservation for their kids, and from 5:30 until 8:30, the kids come to our building. We provide a nutritious dinner, activities, and so forth, and the parent can do whatever they want to for those 3 hours. For a lot of our folks, especially if it's someone trying to single parent because mom or dad is incarcerated, they don't get a break. You know, they just don't get a break from the kids, and that's so important. And they say, well, what do you expect us to do? We don't expect you to do anything. You can go sit in your car for 3 hours if that's what you want to do. Go home and take a bath, read a book, clean your house, go grocery shopping. Did you want to say something? You were just waving to me? That's okay. We do home visitation once they have left the center and they're back in the home. That's the toughest time, that first week, being back with the family, everybody trying to adjust to all of the changes that have gone on. It's also probably the most challenging week for the parent who has been incarcerated, right? It's when they're going to really have to make that choice, stick to that choice, yes.
So you say you do home visits the first week after they get out? Do you travel the state then? Because
Oh, no. No, this is only in the Missoula area. What we are hoping to do, what our big plan is with this resource center, is to start identifying agencies in various areas of Montana so that this kind of service can be offered. In order to strengthen these families, it has to be a wraparound service. It's not an easy job. It has to be the community working together. And I'm going to take a minute right now. In these times, funding is so scarce. We're all seeing it. Nonprofits, especially, well, not just nonprofits, government agencies are being cut back. We're all competing for that funding, but we really need to let go of that competition and think more about collaboration. I can't do all this stuff. I need people like Head Start. I need the school system on board. I need all of these people in place who will be on the team to support this family. It has to be a team, and it has to be coming from everyone, getting the same information.
So what happens if you have a parent in your program, like your career release center, and then they go back to their hometown, then what happens? You guys said you don't follow, so how do you keep in contact?
Well, I think we had like a $300 telephone bill for a client in Miles City. They can call and if that's the best I can do. It just so happened that I was familiar with somebody in Miles City who worked for us, a small nonprofit who I was able to contact and get them. But they have bonded with me. I'm the trusted one. So if it takes a telephone call, just hearing my voice saying, wow, that was tough, but good for you, you did it, I knew you could do it. If that's all it takes, easy enough. And cheap enough, right?
I'm going to interject here too because Marty does not like to brag about herself or the work that she does. But I just want to tell you that after almost 7 years of doing this, Marty still gets phone calls from people that she worked with 6 years ago who came out of pre-release or probation and parole and went back to another small town somewhere in Montana. And it doesn't surprise me anymore, but it used to surprise me that people who had been so disconnected throughout their lives would become so connected to one person just because of the level of trust and the level of support that they received. And the people who would constantly call or send letters or cards saying, "You are the only person in my life who has ever believed in me," said so much.
All right, enough. How embarrassing. Now, where was I? She may have embellished a bit. Phone cards are tough. Sometimes they're tough to come by. Sometimes that's the only contact that parents have with their children or with their partner or with the children's caregiver. So we try to scrounge those up. Donations. People in the community are very good about donating for that type of thing. Gas cards, if you got someone traveling from Billings to visit mom or dad in the Missoula pre-release, that's a long way. It takes a lot of gasoline. So we try to help out that way. Even if they're coming down from Libby, that's a long way, especially with the price of gas. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. It strains my budget. I'm sure it strains them. Lodging assistance for visits. If they're coming from Billings, they're probably not going to drive over here and back in one day, right? So at least one overnight or some kind of arrangements that way. In my dream world, what we're going to have is sort of a safe house, a safe place, a shelter type situation where people who are here for overnight visiting can stay for free. But that's down the line. And that'll take more funding, so I don't want to get in that pot yet. Okay, what are the expectations? Right off the bat, we talk about what they are. Here are mine. This is what I say to every first group. I promise I will do this in return. I need for you to promise me that you will do the same. I promise I'll be accountable. If I'm late, I'm not going to make excuses for it. I'm going to say, I'm late. I apologize for the inconvenience to you, but I'm late. Responsibility, and probably most of all, respect. I will respect you at all times. I will respect what you say, what you think, if you will do the same to me, right? Then we talk about communication. The reason we slip right into communication is because some of these parents think, well, here I am, and I'm a good parent. Why am I in this class? You know, the first class is always kind of a drag because they all just sort of sit there glaring at you like, yeah, what do you have to teach me? And so we talk about communication. It's the essence to every relationship we have, right? Can you think of a relationship you have where communication is not involved? I don't think so. There just isn't one. Communication means speech, what we say, listening, how well are we hearing what the other person is saying, and nonverbal. Now, the nonverbal is the reason I like to talk about this, because I say, you know, you will tell me so much during this class, not by what you say, but by this nonverbal. When I see you slouching in your chair, or your eyes starting to glaze over, or you're not making eye contact or giving me some kind of feedback that you're hearing what I say, that gives me a lot of information without saying a word. So I have a lot of gentlemen who sit up real straight, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and act like they're paying attention whether they are or not. But that works. And you know, I think you do. There's so much work out there to be done. Unfortunately, if the family is not willing to participate, you have to move on to someone who is. And that's the heartbreaker, right? It's the heartbreaker, I think, for every social worker, because we think we can save the world. We can save them all. Okay, my particular strategy, it is a successful program. I will tell you that we have had, gosh, we're going into 7th year, so we've had probably 1,000 people go through this program. And we calculated recidivism, which means have they reoffended, in fall of last year, and our rate was below 10%. Now the state average is above 40. So it does make a difference, you know. And Teresa is right. I do get comments all the time. I had a 44-year-old man say right on the class evaluation, I believe in myself for the first time in my life, because for this last 10 weeks, Marty has believed in me. How sad. 44 years, and in 10 weeks, you can make such a difference. But we talk about working with children. The people, my primary clients are adults, but they are damaged children. They are children who are now in an adult role, and they have never had that support. They've never had someone to say, I think you can do it. You know, they've heard more like, oh, you're so stupid, you can't, you'll never get through that, or I know you're gonna offend again, and that's kind of one of the challenges also, because if that's what the family is saying out there to them, how are you gonna keep them going? You know, we had one client whose family was so involved with drugs, and when I say family, we're talking everybody involved with drugs, shoplifting, some kind of illegal activity, that she, in order to survive and maintain her sobriety and continue being a positive role model for her children, had to sever ties with that family. Not sever ties completely, but set very strong boundaries. So we at the parenting place became her family, you know, until she was able to get a support system in place to replace the drug addiction, the sexual assault people, and all of that stuff. We became her family, and she would stop in day and night, call, and that's just, you have to just kind of be there to say, it'll be okay, you'll get through this. Holidays were awful. You can imagine, holidays were awful. Okay, my strategy. First off, I pay a lot of attention to how I dress. You probably think, God, why does she wear that rag today? But this is how I dress. Whenever I'm thinking about how to dress to work with a client, I don't want to pull their focus. Do you know, does that make sense to you? I don't want them to say, wow, what a great shirt. You know, I wish I could have that shirt. So I shop mostly at Goodwill, and most of the things I wear have been worn by somebody else for a long time. And I just sort of want to slip into the picture and be that support mechanism. In my closet, I have work uniforms, pretty much is what I call them. This I will wear to work. This I will wear when I go to Las Vegas in approximately 2 hours. I will be leaving, and so we might have to wrap up on time. I do have a flight out at 1 o'clock to meet my sister and my daughter in Vegas for the weekend. So that will be fun, huh? Yeah. Okay. I also developed this as part of my strategy. I thought, what can I give to these people that they don't get in their everyday life? Homemade treats, you know? When you sit in prison, in jail, you know, nobody bakes you cookies. So, well, yeah, or cake with a file. That's right. So once a week, I have a little baking session, and I bake up treats so I can take them in. That works just great because I take them in, put them on the table, get the room all set up. The guys come in. They are so excited about the treats. They start munching. Then I shut the door, and they're my captives. Ha-ha! So then I have them for an hour. And they don't even realize it because they're sitting there munching on their treats. They really love it. We talk a lot about confidentiality. Jenny and I were talking earlier. One thing about our jobs is you can't talk about it to anybody. Specifically, you know, it's not like you can just go home and vent. You have to keep all of that information in your brain, except for the mothership. You know, within your agency, it's so important to be able to vent and relieve some of that stress and pressure and sadness, you know. And sadness, there are times when it's just overwhelmingly sad because someone hasn't been successful and you had such hope. So we talk about confidentiality. I want them to know I'm not going to share this information with anyone, including your case manager. I know you signed a confidentiality or an agreement to release information to them, but the only thing I will say to your case manager is they attended, they were attentive or not attentive, and that's it. I will not share details of your life. In return, I don't want you sharing any of my details because I share a lot of my personal stories. And I said, I don't want you out there in the day room sharing this with all your friends, right? And so it takes usually, by the end of the first session, people will start to relax and know that it's safe to be able to talk. And it may be the only place in their life where it's safe to be able to talk about their frustrations. We laugh a lot. We like to laugh, relieve stress. Great stress reliever, right? Yeah.
These groups are not co-ed.
The groups?
They're men.
Well, when I'm at the pre-release, they are men and women. They have to be separated. But I also do in-house at the parenting place, and those are co-ed. And a lot of times the women from the pre-release will come there. You know, it's kind of, the rules of the pre-release are kind of interesting because if they're at the pre-release, it can't be a co-ed class, but if they come to the center to take a class, the same people can come there and be together. I don't get it, but there are a lot of things in life I don't get. Why did you ask that question? Oh, okay, yeah. The co-ed, I think, is really beneficial. It's, in some ways, gosh, isn't life just like that? You can always see the good and the bad in everything. In some ways, it's very beneficial. In other ways, these men and women are threatened with their own image. And so maybe by having the opposite sex in the room, it changes the dynamics completely. I have a difficult time occasionally. We'll have an intern or an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer or someone who sort of shadows me. Oh my gosh, not for long. I don't even think we'll try that anymore. As soon as I walk into the room with that stranger, nobody says anything. Yeah, that trust is not there. I'm not talking. And so it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. So, and a lot of times in the co-ed groups that happens as well. There's a lot of what I call the mating dance that goes on, the tee-hee-hee, the, and people not really thinking about the issues they need to be thinking about.
I was just going to say, again, that goes back to the dress kind of code that we talk about too, with depending on, the outward appearance of any new person going into a group, whether it's the men or the women, and mainly the men. We have practicum students who are bubbly, blonde, 20-year-olds who just are not going to gain the kind of respect when they go in to teach a class. And it's sad that it's like that, but it's a fact.
Yes, it is. It is. We did. I had to send one of our cute little things to the car. I said, you need to go out and put your sweatshirt on. No cleavage. And see, cleavage has never been a problem for me, no matter what I'm wearing, so it doesn't matter. Plus, in all fairness, I'm old enough to be their grandma. I mean, at 60, almost 64, I'm old enough to be their grandma. I'm pretty safe, If not their grandma, at least their mom. And so I'm not a peer, I also love it because I'm also considered an elder by many of my clients, and that I just find so wonderful. It's so flattering. Also, I have an agenda. Like today, I sort of have this agenda up here. But if you want to talk, I'm going to let you talk as much as you want to. And if we get off task, it doesn't make any difference. That's what I do with the group. Whatever they need to talk about, that's where we're going to go. Now, I'm always sure to get the points of the curriculum into the conversation, but they don't have to go by my agenda. I'll let them think that they are leading the way, right? What does that do? What does that do in any group? It empowers people, right? Engage. And once you're invested, you get so much more out of it. I also let them do the writing. I have a policy. I never sit in front of a client and make notes on what they're saying. Hello, is that for me? Is that Vegas? They want me already? That's right, I didn't turn mine off, but nobody ever calls me. So. And I didn't tell you to do that. Where was I? Oh yeah, writing. Oh, they really want me. It sounds like one of my machines winning. So how do you feel if you're talking to someone and they're like, really? Writing it down?
Oh yeah. You could be writing your cookie recipe.
Yeah, exactly. But it makes us real careful about what we say, right? I think anytime you think this is being written down or recorded, so, if something needs to be written down, I will say to them, gosh, could you just jot that down for me so I'll remember? And that takes a lot of the pressure off. Basically, I think this is the biggest thing. I speak and listen from the heart. I really care of tremendous passion and have from day one. I think social workers are born, you know. These people made a mistake. Do they have to pay the rest of their life for the mistake? I don't think so. That's not the kind of world I want to live in, so I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to believe that they can be different, because they can be. I have reinvented myself, gosh, at least 5 or 6 times in my 60-some years. It's kind of fun.
I know, I do that. I'm really close to my students. And sometimes I see negative comments or the attitudes from peers, like you're doing too much.
Yeah, that's true. I think that is true, and I think in my case anyway, occasionally I need to be told, boundaries, right? I need to be reminded. It's when I start slipping over into that enabling rather than empowering area. And that's a challenge for everyone who works in social services, isn't it? It always is. There's always that client that you just have a little more hope for, or I don't know, touches your heart just a little bit more. And you have a tendency. So one question I say to myself is, would I do this for every client? And if the answer is, well, probably not this one or this one, then it's not a good idea to do it, right? Has to sort of be a blanket effort. What are the effects on the family? For one thing, is incarceration one of those socially engaging events? I mean, do people rush to the home once they find out dad went to prison or mom went to prison and say, what can we do to help? No. Do they? Do you know? Do you know of any who? Now maybe if mom gets cancer, has to go to the hospital, then folks will gather around and try to support and bring in food and help out with the kids. But it's not socially acceptable to be separated by incarceration. It's not glamorous. So people don't have a tendency. That's where the stigma comes in, a social stigma about incarceration, about breaking the law, right? Do you agree? Yes, thank you. Also, trauma from separation, trauma for everyone, and you have to look at the whole picture. You can't just look at one little piece of it. You can't just look at one kid. You can't just look at one parent. You can't just look at one grandma who's raising the kids. You have to look at everybody, because everybody is going through a trauma from the separation, right? Lots of things have changed. There almost always is economic strain. Part of the income is gone, right? Even, maybe mom only worked a couple days a week, but that was a couple days. And when she wasn't working, she helped out here and here and here. Well, all of that is gone now. So there's tremendous effects on all of the family. Not just the kids, not just the parents, but everybody involved. This is important. This is the whole picture. Mapping the family, right? Now, I've used dad as the person who is incarcerated in this one. It's up to me to find out from dad through conversations who's involved in your life. Talk to me about how you were parented. Talk to me, what is your relationship like with your parents? What's your relationship like? Who of these people is really closely involved? For some people, it's all of them, right? We have an ex-wife, we have an ex-husband, we have a stepkids, we have a stepfather, we have grandparents who are involved, we have aunts and uncles and cousins. All of these people are influential in the lives of this person, which means influential in the success of this family. So it's up to us to get to know, who are these people? Who has the power, You know, when I do development, I talk about how at about 5 years old, kids are able to figure out who has the power in this family. Mom does here, dad does here, right? They figure it out, they're very smart. Well, we have to figure out here, if the grandparents have a tremendous amount of power and influence in this family, then nobody is going to buy any strategy unless it's supported by the grandparents, right? So you can come up with a beautiful, wonderful, workable, what was that word I used? Strategy. Totally left my mind. Strategy. But if folks aren't bought into it, it's just not going to work, right? This isn't always easy to get to know these people. Those are the things. What are their strengths? You know, here again, you want to find out what are their strengths and how can I build on those strengths? You know, how can we design this strategy so it appeals to the strength of this individual so that they will be accepting and buy into it? Anybody do this? Anybody get this much involved with your families? Good. I know you do. I believe we have several families in common, as a matter of fact. So, let's talk specifically about kids for a while. How does incarceration affect kids? Tell me, what are some of the effects you see in your line of work? Don't be afraid, come on, we're friends now. We've been together nearly an hour. Yes?
Attachment issues, especially like, well, I'll just use like if the dad goes away, mom gets a new boyfriend, his dad has this person, and just, you know, we see like I work with a lot of 2-year-olds, and so they're just at an age where it's very confusing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That is so true. I thought this was a great little chart. It's in your handout. Talks about how incarceration affects children, at what age. And really, when I read it, I thought, oh, wow, this is great. And it wasn't this particular one. It was when I was going to do, one of the people in my class asked if we could talk about how it affects kids and at what age. Well, when I read the information, I thought, duh, whatever stage they are developmentally is what's going to be affected, right? So if they're younger than 2 years old, bonding and attachment is definitely going to be affected. When bonding and attachment is affected, it really just splinters out into their whole world, doesn't it? It is such a difficult thing to work with, and definitely we see it a lot. What about the babies who are born in prison? They get 48 hours with mom, and then off they go to a caregiver until mom is released. What do you suppose happens with bonding and attachment there? I can tell you what happens. They bond, hopefully they bond and attach with the caregiver, with the grandma. You know, most of the time when it's a female who is incarcerated, the children go to grandparents first, and then extended family second. When it's dad who's incarcerated, who gets stuck with all the burden? Mom. Yeah, mom. Mom gets to be the single parent. Mom gets to try to figure out how to feed the kids with such limited income. And it's tough. It's really hard for everybody. So let's get back to kids here. We kind of wandered off. Yeah.
I just wonder, what about guilt? Do kids carry a lot of guilt around?
Guilt by association. Sorry. Here, let me hold that up. There you go. Yes. That, and I possibly could have put that on the stage with the stigma. There's a tremendous amount of guilt, not just kids, but kids feel guilt by association. That parent, they are part of who that parent is, right? So somehow, if there's something wrong with them, there's something wrong with me. And that is sad. And it's also something we need to work on. We need to be aware of. That's what's going on.
Can I throw in one more thing too?
Yes.
Stigma and the guilt associated, just in general conversations that we've had, that's one of the reasons for the toolkit, because children want to talk about issues that are bothering them, but when no one else wants to talk about those issues, then kids feel like there's something wrong.
Right.
And so they have no avenue to get anything out or deal with anything or process anything.
And that's right under the guilt thing. These guys obviously should have been at the top, right? Guilt by association, major factor. The unspeakable event, that thing you don't talk about. How does that make a kid feel? What? We can't even talk about this? Yeah, absolutely. Something is wrong here. So, someone said earlier, how much do you tell a child? Personally, I feel like, first off, you have to figure out what development, having a hard time with that word today, it just doesn't want to fully come out.
Where are they developmentally?
Thank you. See how good she is? Where are they developmentally? And then approach the subject from there. They need to talk about it. They need to be able to talk about it. They need to know where the parent is. I absolutely do not believe in deception at any time. You need to tell them. It's a simple thing. They broke the rule. This is the consequence. You have consequences when you break rules. Daddy has a consequence because he broke a rule. A rule for an adult is called a law. And then it depends on where they are. How much do you give to them? You don't tell him he's away at school. You don't tell him he's out of town on a job. You don't tell him he's in the hospital. Do you? Mm-mm. Why not? First off, because they're going to find out you lied to them. Some kid on the playground is going to tell them, hey, your dad's not out of town on a job, he's in prison. You want them to find out that way? You don't. You want them to know. They don't need to have a lot of detail about it. You get to choose how much detail they get. I suggest that if at all possible, and I know it isn't always, it's probably best coming from a relationship that the children already have in place. That kind of information, that's what I mean. So, if they have a good relationship with grandma, visit with grandma. Give grandma some coaching on how to talk to them, but let her be the one to talk to the child because there's a trust there, right? And if you have a trusting relationship with them, then that's fine too. But just getting information from somebody who they don't really know can be damaging, right? If you tell him he's away at school, then, well, I miss him so bad, and this is so awful, so how am I going to start feeling about school? I hate school. Took my daddy away, right? Tell him he's in the hospital, so now they're going to make the same association with getting sick. It's a terrible, painful thing. Plus, it's a lie. They get enough to deal with. They need for people they trust to be able to count on them telling them the truth. Do you agree?
We hear this a lot, or I do, mommy or daddy went away because they're bad. And that is just such a heavy statement of, obviously the good and the bad, and then as well as just telling the child that they're bad, that might happen to them, and it's just like I cringe every time I hear that. Do you have any suggestions of I guess you just do.
I am so excited about this toolkit. And if you want a copy of the toolkit, MAFTI has a table out here, and there's a sign-up sheet out there. Make sure you fill it out. I don't know what it asks you for, frankly. But make sure you fill it out and we'll make sure that you get a copy of it. It's printed, it's not a cheap document to print, so we're encouraging people, photocopy, do whatever, you know. If the only part you're concerned about is the arrest page for this client, make a copy of it and give it to them, you know, share it, yeah.
So how much is too much information for a kid to hear? You know, like I've had a mom come in with her daughter who is 5, almost 5, and I asked where Dad was because I didn't know that he'd been arrested. And she said, well, Daddy beat up Mommy, so he got arrested and went to jail. And, you know, I understand them knowing, like, they broke the law, and so they had to go to jail. But for some kids, like my son, he sees police lights, he says, and I don't know where he got this, but he'll say, they're going to get arrested and get killed. And I have no idea where this idea came from my head, but it's a huge fear. What is jail? What does it mean? What do you do there? So, and how much does the kid need to know about what landed the parents in jail?
It may be that this particular young lady witnessed the event, and that's how she got the information, you know. I guess I always try to see things from every different angle, and having worked in domestic violence, there were kids who did, you know. And I'll tell you this also, Mom would come to the shelter so badly beaten that I could hardly recognize her. The kids witnessed it, and as soon as that phone rang and they knew it was Daddy, they ran right in to talk to him. It doesn't matter to a child. A parent is a parent, you know. So for us, that comment sounds awful. For a young person, it may not be as awful as it sounds. How much information, how much detail, you really just have to take each situation individually. I think you can spare them. I suggest sparing them the courtroom unless they're called into the courtroom as a witness, you know. They don't need to be sitting in there and listening because some of that is not very respectful, you know. It can get to be very, very ugly, and children do not need to be exposed to that. I'm going to get to you in just 1 second. As little change as possible, as much information so they don't feel like something's going on and it's being kept from them, right? As much change, as little change as possible in their lives is what I suggest. Even if some of it is not, you know, it's not in their best interest, don't be an advocate to jump in and change everything and make it all better overnight. Those kids need the stability and the security and the comfort of something staying intact, even if it's a dysfunctional dad or mom. You know, if their safety isn't at risk, let it ride, work on it gradually. Now, you can talk.
I guess my question for you is kind of how do you work with people that are incarcerated because of domestic violence? Like, I don't know, I would have a hard time working with somebody that, you know, beat up their partner and then you're trying to work with them to be able to see their kids. I don't know, I guess that's my question for you.
Well, it is, you have to believe in people. You have to believe that people can change. My experience in domestic violence is rarely does a perpetrator harm the children, can beat the out of mom, but rarely does that transfer to the children. So most of the time the children are safe in that environment. You know, I think I work with the population I work with because somebody needs to believe in them. If nobody believed in them, what kind of world would we have? Somebody has to believe that they will change, and most of the time they do. but it takes someone to say, you can do this, and constantly tell them they can do it, and make sure they're setting up baby steps for those successes so they can be successful. You know, it takes a tremendous amount of planning. The reason I go to Vegas is because when I'm home, I work 24/7. You know, I may be home vacuuming my house, but I'm thinking about that client and this family and what's going on here and coming up with a game plan. I go to Vegas and nothing matters. I don't think about any of them. So it's, you know, it's hard, and some people can't. If you read in my bio, it says I worked 6 years maybe in gerontology. That was my major. And boy, after 6 years around those old people, I said, this is not for me. You know, another group that I don't work well with are adolescents. I know that about myself. They frustrate me to death. Not that they don't everybody, but another group is mentally ill. You know, my mother was extremely mentally ill. I grew up with it. I don't want any more of it. You know, I paid my dues, that's it. Somebody else can do that. So, you know, I think we all just sort of find our little niches, and that's where we shine. It's difficult to try to shine in an area if it doesn't feel right to you. If it's just a job that you get up and go to every day to collect that paycheck, get out of it. You're not doing anybody any good. Not you, you're cheating yourself out of life, and you're also cheating the families you work with. It has to be a passion. It has to come from your heart. It has to be, I don't care how much I get paid, I don't care how many hours I have to work, this is the job that needs to be done, this is what this family needs in order to move forward. Go ahead.
I just have a question about, we do have and have had in the past several children who've had a real fear of people that are in law enforcement. And so one of the things we thought we would do this year is we do the Ed Eagle Gun Safety Program, and is to have the law enforcement police officers come in and do some of that so the children can be around and see somebody in uniform and know that it's not always a bad thing.
Yes.
What other kinds of things do you think, I mean, you know, other than just saying, you know, these are good and they're not bad? Because we do have several families who instill that in children that police are.
Yes, they do. You know, a lot of times when someone in the family is incarcerated, what do they say? I didn't do it. Yeah, this is a bummer. They lied. Blah, 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 blah. What does that do to a child's belief in authority or in law enforcement? Totally destroys it. That's why we see those little hooligans those little bullies on the playground. Because by golly, it says right down here, I'm going to defy the stigma through anger and retaliation. It's survival. It's how they can survive. It's how they can live with it. You know? Where did that come from? What did that have to do with what you were saying? I sure have a soapbox, don't I?
It's disturbing.
That is an excellent idea. I think you do want kids to have a positive exposure to law enforcement. We want to help encourage them to respect authority, right? That's part of why our society is fragmenting a bit right now. Even many adults don't respect authority, right? They go through right through a red light. They can see big as life that it's red, but oh well, I'm not going to stop for it, you know? It just amazes me. Who cares?
Are there very many, I don't know how law enforcement is trained, but I just think from a child's standpoint, when somebody comes into a home, the parent is arrested in front of the child, you know, is there any kind of training for law enforcement on how to deal with that child, and, you know, what is there at that point to support that?
There is supposed to be a social worker accompany law enforcement if, now here's the caveat, if they know that children will be present in the home. All they have to do is say, we didn't know. you know, because to make that connection, to get that team together is difficult, and time sometimes is of the essence. Yes.
Is that only for when the arrest is going to be made and they know that ahead of time, or is it even for disturbance calls? Because I have a family that receives multiple disturbance calls, and so they have police coming to the home quite a bit
Right.
on those disturbance calls, but I don't think that they've had a social work with them.
No, and I don't think they would, you know. Yeah, it's just for the big cases.
With regard to information for kids, what extent do you involve school counselors or school teachers or daycare providers as far as providing information so that they can deal with everything that's going on in these kids' lives?
Okay, now, these questions get kind of tricky. I want you all to know that we all have to come up with our own game plan based on our own values, morals, ethics, etc. My feeling, my personal feeling is you involve everybody. You lay it out there on the table. Why do we keep it a secret? As soon as we start keeping it a secret from anybody, then boom. You talk to the kids in the classroom about what is incarceration, you know? I mean, I truly believe we need to start doing that. If we have 10% of our kids, 10% of our kids, that's a ton of kids being affected by this. Then probably you've got several in the classroom who are dying to be able to let that out of the hat, right? So I personally believe you talk to everybody about it, but you have to educate folks also as to how they're going to talk about it, you know? If you're going to be judgmental, is that a hand up or was that waving to me again? You're so good. You guys just keep waving to me. I just keep waving back. Because I love to talk. Okay, so I've lost my train of thought. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So you have to kind of make sure that the people you're bringing onto the team have some education about how are we going to work this, you know, and where do you have a bias, you know, and if you have a bias, maybe you shouldn't be on the team.
That's what I meant when I said sometimes teachers begin negatively. It's like they're judgmental or they have a bias. They're there for the kids, but they can't let go of their bias.
Yeah. Yes, my sister, and I love her dearly, says about my job that I work with the population who lives in the sewer. I find that extremely offensive. But we have very different views, basic values about the world, about our earth, about how we're all connected, you know? It's a great kid's song that says, I am the boat, you are the sea, I sail in you, you sail in me. And that is so true. Every one of us in this room, even though some of us just met an hour ago, that is so true. You have become a part of who I am. Now you get to talk.
We have a lot of parents who bring their kids into the jail to visit the co-parents behind glass. And I have always had really mixed feelings about that. I'm just wondering what is it? Is that an acceptable thing to do for a child? Is that, does it depend on the individual child?
I would say yes. Because that's what I say about all of it, right? It's all about the individual, and every individual is very unique. For some children, that can be extremely traumatic. If you try it and it's traumatic, step away and figure out another way to have that interaction, right? You have to read the cues that the kids are giving you about it. That visiting at the prison can be very traumatic for a child. They can't figure out, why can't they sit on daddy's lap? Why can't they give daddy a hug? Why can't they can't figure those rules out. So, it just really is up to the individual child and how they're able to process the
And
information.
sometimes if you're still in an intact family and the parent does do something, that may be the only interaction that we do get with the father and if they are involved. probably, like you said, try it, and if it doesn't work, then don't do it again. But I would strongly believe that you would want the family to stay together as much as possible, because if you're trying and the dad is trying, if they are an intact family,
Yes.
And even when they aren't an intact family, I think one of the most impactful panel presentations I witnessed was a panel of children affected by incarceration who talked about their rights, and that's where the Children's Bill of Rights came from. And if you haven't read the Children's Bill of Rights, you should.
I think you can get it online. Excuse me for interrupting.
These children had been put through the ringer, so to speak, and they were talking about the importance of relationship with even a parent that they didn't know all that well. It had to do with who they were, their history, their background, their culture. It had to do with everything that was them. And if you sever ties without them having processed that and determining that that's what needs to happen, and sometimes it is what needs to happen, but until a child is able to process through that and you can get to that place in a healthy way, then it just creates a void and it creates a lot of dysfunction within a child. So even though something seems bad to us, sometimes it's in the best interest of the child, and we need to keep an open mind and make sure that we're
sometimes
taking
those
that
kids,
into
that's like
consideration.
what they look forward to on those weeks, is that
Right.
15 minutes of
Yep.
last time with their parents.
Yep.
And they need that.
And they get a kick out of talking on the telephone, and you can kind of coach the parents about, great game that a lot of my kids like to play is that hands on the glass. It's a fun way to interact with dad, even though you can't touch. You can play a little game here, It's almost like touching. So, yeah, it would be nice if it were all cut and dried, but it really is so dependent on the child. And I have some kids who just flat out say, I don't want to see her. I do not want to see her. And yet the two younger siblings absolutely want to see her. That's okay too, it's okay. Everybody has a right to feel what they're feeling. And, unless we have had the same experience of these children, we have no idea how they're processing it. Yes.
Because we work with more families that have been incarcerated, and we mainly work with the families of the people, their families. Is it okay to call you and kind of brainstorm with you about the best way to work with these families? Because a lot of times we're just going in and not knowing how to help them.
Yes, absolutely. That is the collaboration I was talking about, because frankly, I could use some folks to bounce things off of as well, It's kind of tough to be out there on your own and trying to help families problem solve when sometimes you're not fully aware of what's going on. But absolutely, I will be the one answering this 800 number if you want to call me from wherever. Except for this weekend, I may not be able to hear it. Yes. Who else had something to say? Do try to build collaborative efforts within your community. Try to get everybody on board. We're thinking about doing a full-day workshop in Helena and invite people from throughout the state, where folks can start building these support systems. We all have heard it takes an entire village to raise a child. It also takes an entire village to strengthen these families. Not one agency can do it on their own. It takes everybody being on board and working together so that they're getting the same information and the same support. Okay, let's take a look at this now. Adjustment to altered family. We said that one, didn't we? Altered family, what does that mean? Means, wow, mom went off to prison, now I'm going to live with grandma. Right? Ooh, that can be scary. That can be very, very scary. I'm not going to be able to sleep in my own bed. I don't have my own room. My dog can't come with me. bummer. We also have to think about what is the relationship between the caregiver and the child. It sounds great that the kid gets to go live with grandma, right? Well, it wouldn't have been in my case. My grandma was a horror movie. She hated me, and I would have been terrorized the whole time I was there. So, grandmas are not all sweet little old people. So we have to make sure that that is a good, healthy relationship. And one of the things that they're working on at the Montana Women's Prison is more control over where those babies are placed. Where are we with that? Is it done?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. It's in the process because mom can totally determine who gets that baby. 48 hours is what she gets with baby in the hospital, and then mom gets to determine who the child is going with. Well, it could be one of...
She can say that that baby goes anywhere, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be with like her immediate family. She can
Exactly. Yes. 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 And the feeling, we have a sort of a sister agency in Billings called the Billings Family Tree, and they do the parenting and the life skills program at the prison. And they are concerned because these babies are going into very unsafe environments. Baby went home with one of mom's meth buddies. Oh, great. Great. So I don't know how we got to that point. I must be running out of steam. Coping skills of the caregiver. Some people can cope with kids a lot better than others, right? Now, I'm not sure that I would really like to have a 3-year-old come live at my house. I think I just like to get my rest a little bit better than that. And I'm not sure I have the patience to deal with it, Some people just don't have, especially if it's grandma, If it's a grandparent, let's think about, dependent on public assistance. How does that make you feel? If you're my age, you wouldn't know because nobody's my age. Too bad for you. I'll tell you how it makes you feel. A couple of years ago when I moved to Missoula, with a job in place. And unfortunately, that job did not work out. So I found myself unemployed. I had to file for unemployment. The first time in my life ever that I have taken any kind of what I considered public assistance, even though I had paid into it all of those years of working. But it was so degrading to me. How do you think grandma feels having to go ask for food stamps? It's not a pleasant feeling for many people. You really kind of have to swallow your pride. So what about health? Maybe she's got a bad knee. How's she going to get up and down and take care of a 2-year-old? How's that going to affect her? Does she have a support system in place of young moms, young parents to share stories with, to vent with? No. So see, everybody faces such great challenges in this situation. And we have to be aware of empathy. Last week I asked my gentlemen in the class, I was telling them about this presentation, and by the way, 3 of them volunteered to come, and I thought that would make a great panel. But I knew that you guys would want to hear them talk more than me, so I didn't invite them. Because they would be better at saying stuff than me. But I said, so here's what I'm supposed to be doing. Give me some suggestions. What would you say to a caregiver or someone working with your kids? The first thing, and I'm going to show you the diversity, and it's very interesting. Almost all of my classes are this way. Just what I consider typical representation of Montana. I have white, I have black, I have Hispanic, I have Native American. And no matter if it's 20 or 5, those groups seem to be represented. So just because I want you to know that this is coming from different areas, my black guy said, tell them to have empathy. Think about what our families are going through. think about what we are going through. You know, the toughest price is not being locked up. It's being away from our kids. That's the real punishment. The next guy, who was white, said, people talk about us doing hard time. We're not doing hard time. My wife's doing the hard time. My wife's the one trying to make it on a limited income, taking care of 5 boys as a single parent, you know, thinking about all of the things. And the last one always gets me. The last one was my Native American who said, every time I sit down to a meal, I wonder if my kids are eating. How would that make you feel? Then I had to tell him I had allergies, so we had to quit talking about it. Pass me the Kleenex, my allergies are acting up. But you know, they do. They talk to you from the heart, and that all came from the heart. And we all get kind of wrapped up in our own little world and our own little segment of what we have to do. And we kind of forget what's going on out here. And we criticize mom for making a certain choice, but put yourself in her place, you know? Of course she left her kids in an unsafe, what you consider unsafe. She had to get to work because if she didn't go to work, she was going to get fired, and then she wouldn't even be able to feed the kids or put a roof over their head. You know? It's a give and take thing. You choose your battles. People are not going to be perfect. Many people grew up in a culture where some of those things were socially acceptable, you know? Going to prison was not a big deal. Heck, Dad did it, Grandpa did it, Uncle Harry did it. It's not a big deal. Breaking that cycle is tough. But we can do it, but I don't think we can do it by not talking about it. We need to be talking about it with kids, with adults. We have to get rid of the prejudice. And that seems kind of funny, doesn't it? Get rid of the prejudice, and then it becomes maybe not so acceptable. Does that even make any sense to you? I have a tough time. Think about it. That'll give you something to think about on your ride home. Okay, social sports, we talked about that. Insufficient income. You know, we already talked about that. The income is almost always affected in some way. Sometimes housing is affected. You know, what are parents who are out there looking for housing, the biggest barriers for a family going out after a parent has been incarcerated? 2 biggest ones are what?
Is it when you have a felony or something?
Uh-huh. So what are the 2 biggest barriers for that? And fairly important, housing and employment. Housing and employment. This is where you can be an advocate. I've gone to Housing Authority many, many times to advocate for a felon, saying give them a chance. Yep, made a mistake, but you know what? I think this person learned from their mistake and they're ready to move on. We've all made mistakes, right? That's one way I can work with this population. We've all made mistakes. There isn't one of us in this room who hasn't made a mistake. And I don't mind admitting mine. Sometimes I even laugh at them because they're so stupid. The only bad mistake is the one you don't learn from. So if they have learned from it, life moves forward. Another gigantic hurdle for these parents who have been incarcerated is guilt. They have so much guilt from being away from their children that they're not good parents when they go back home, you know? That's why I do the home visiting. That's why I have to be there to say, boundaries, boundaries, right? Because they're so happy to be reunited, they don't set those boundaries for the kids, and they give them far too many materialistic things, even though they can't pay the rent, you know? Just doesn't make good sense. But they want to somehow make up for it. So that is really something. And literally, we've had a couple clients that I've practically lived with for a week or so, because it's tough. I can tell you, about a case that absolutely was destined to fall from the beginning. It happened to be one of my very first ones. Mom went to prison, went through the pre-release program, had 4 kids. On her 30th birthday, the oldest child was 16, she finished with live out, and all 4 kids came to live with her again. Do you think that that had a chance of being successful? Absolutely not. Didn't take her 2 weeks. The kids started running away, the kids got in trouble, mom reoffended, and boom. Because the community wasn't there to get that stuff in place for her, you know? But Grandma had the kids. Grandma was the caregiver while she was in prison. Grandma had it. Grandma's health was bad. Grandma was tired of dealing with teenagers, you know? And so as soon as this person could have her kids, boom, there they were on her doorstep. Wasn't a very happy birthday. It was a very sad situation, and it's one of those you could see coming and do nothing at all about. So they're not always happy stories, but you live with them, right? Because you know, in domestic violence, I always said to myself, I know that even though she comes back 3, 4, 5 times, I know that someday something I have said is going to click and change her life. And you just have to live with that hope, because you don't always get to see the success, right? Inadequate space. Yeah, Grandma whoops. Let me finish with Grandma's house. Grandma has a 1-bedroom house, and now she has 3 little ones who come to live with her. How happy do you think those folks are going to be? Not very, right? Plus, if Grandma's on low-income housing, some kind of public assisted housing, they're going to be complaining, wait a minute, those kids can't all be there. That's too many people, you're not approved for that, right? So you got all kinds. And what about space for these kids? I used to have my own room. Now I have to share with 3 others, you know? Whew, that can be tough. Go ahead.
This is kind of a sidetrack, but it's a question that I think I'm seeing a lot of overlap with another population. If there's a program that you guys work with, or a program that exists for working with families who have lost a parent to suicide, who either have been incarcerated or not, if there's something similar to set up this kind of support.
Did you, I didn't quite catch all of it.
I'm seeing an overlap with families who have lost a parent to suicide, who may or may not have been incarcerated at the time of the suicide. And I'm just wondering if you guys have an organization that you work with, or that you know of, that can work with these families. Because I'm just seeing a lot of overlap with those families as well.
No, the answer is no. As a matter of fact, if we knew somebody who could work with those families, they'd be working for us. Because it's hard. It's a tough commitment to make. You know, it's a difficult population to work with because there are so many variables, and because it doesn't come with a manual. You know, you have to just be totally flexible and let the picture develop as it will, right? If you go in with an agenda that doesn't fit that family, you're going to fall flat on your face, and so are they. So it takes a certain kind of individual to be able to do that. We've had many people come through our program and say, well, now, where's the manual that says what I do in this situation? Well, duh, there isn't one.
Missoula, I'm just curious if there's an organization that...
And I was going to say, I'm not sure that we see that same kind of overlap with the families we serve with suicide.
Overlap, but I think she was saying common, yeah.
But I also see families who have incarcerated parent who then commit suicide upon return, or situations that have overlap in the actual...
You know, and I think, tell me what you guys think, I think that whenever there is a trauma in a child's life, we see a lot of the same outcomes, right? So the trauma can be a car accident with someone being killed, or it can be a number of different things, and we'll sort of see the same outcome. quickly, I want to say to you that I have nothing else to say. I read all of my lines. Yes.
Getting back to the respite care, if there is a situation where grandma is raising her grandchildren and she's just had it up over her head and she needs that break, is that service available for her then too through your?
Absolutely. The service is available to anyone, but we especially stress it with populations where we know the caregiver is overburdened, has taken on a tremendous role. Yes.
So when making referrals to your agency, do you take direct referrals for the families, not necessarily the offender,
Yes.
or do you? Okay.
Sure do. Yeah. So grab some of these flyers, take them back to your community, get them out there, let people know. This is also a great avenue for those folks in the small communities where sometimes the stigma can be even greater. They can call and talk to someone who will just listen and let them vent, and with no threat. Jenny.
I guess what I would see within a couple of areas I've recently started looking at is a lack of bonding. As you said, there's a 48-hour child who's often, I don't know, it doesn't make any difference the length of time they're with that caregiver. And I realize they have a choice to make, and sometimes it may be a family member, it may be a grandparent, it may be an aunt, or maybe just a friend that they. And I'm hoping there's some supervision of that child by the state when they're placed. Whether that happens, I don't know. But then when they come back out, what do we do to help that child bond with that parent if that parent is truly interested in being with the parent? Is there programs for that parent? Because what I'm saying is an automatic a protection from the foster parent or the grandparent to want to keep that child because, of course, this person is no good because you already labeled this person and not a reacceptance of that person as she just made a mistake.
Yes, absolutely. See that all the time. There is not a single program to address these issues. When there's a bonding issue, a child probably needs to be seeing a counselor, right? Someone who is specifically trained in working. I'm going to tell you how I would handle that. Specifically trained with working with individuals with bonding and attachment, right? Then I want that counselor to coach me now. What can I be helping with when I'm involved with that family? How can I be encouraging the same thing so that I'm not pulling one way and the counselor pulling another way? So, that's why I was saying it takes an entire village, Maybe it takes mom getting some mental health stuff. Maybe mom needs to be on meds. I'm not a big pusher of medication, but for many folks, they need to have those in order to maintain stability, especially if there has been extended drug use. The brain gets used to that drug, So as they're coming out, as they're leveling out, we need to replace the illegal drug with a legal substance to help them maintain stability. You guys have been great. I can see you ready to go because everybody picked up their stuff. I won't take it personally. If you have any more questions, I'll take them. If not, you can go because I need to sit down. My leg is hurting.
We need one of these. I wonder if I can't your name, so I haven't filled out the form. For those of you that you both got credit, I need to initial one of the forms. I do not get it and don't have any stickers. So if you need to stick on, I need to initial your form before you leave the room. And then I'll get this filled out and sign it for the. And I think it's Lisa. I can't remember.
You're welcome. Thank you.